Your room smells like old age. Monica, my daughter-in-law, didn't whisper it softly. She didn't even lower her tone. She said it right there in the hallway, phone pressed to her ear, laughing like it was harmless. And I was standing 3 feet away. I didn't argue, I didn't cry, I didn't defend myself. I packed my things, and before they came back from their little weekend getaway, I sold the house. When they unlocked the front door, a lawyer was waiting inside. And the first sentence out of his mouth, it changed everything. And before we begin, if stories about strength, boundaries, and real-life lessons resonate with you, make sure you like and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I read every single one, and make sure you're subscribed because this story isn't just about revenge, it's about power. My name is Alina Brooks. Most people call me Ellie. I'm 78 years old. I was married to Thomas Brooks for 49 years before cancer took him 8 years ago. I worked as a probate court administrator for over 3 decades. I've read more wills, trusts, and estate disputes than most attorneys. I know how families fall apart over money. I know how people change when they start calculating what someone's life is worth. And I know the look in someone's eyes when they think you're in the way. The house Daniel and Monica live in. It's technically our family home. That's how Daniel introduces it at dinner parties. My parents' place we renovated. What he never says is this: the deed is still in my name. Thomas was a real estate investor, conservative, careful. He believed in layers. You never put everything in one bucket, he used to say, and you never transfer control before you're ready. After he passed, I kept things structured exactly how we built them. The primary residence stayed solely under my ownership. Daniel and Monica moved in 3 years ago after one of Daniel's investment deals went sideways. Temporary, he said, just until things stabilized. Temporary has a funny way of turning permanent when people get comfortable. At first, it felt nice. I thought maybe the house would feel alive again. Daniel works as a financial consultant. He knows how to talk numbers. Monica is a luxury event planner. She knows how to talk image. Together, they talk a lot about elevating things. They renovated the kitchen, white marble, gold fixtures, everything Instagram ready. Monica started hosting charity dinners and wine tastings. Guests would walk through my hallway like it was part of a showroom. My bedroom was at the end of the corridor, the original master. Thomas designed it with oversized windows facing the oak trees. It smells like sandalwood and the lavender sachets I've used for 20 years. Apparently, that was the problem. That afternoon, I had gone upstairs to grab my sweater. I heard Monica's voice before I saw her. I don't know what it is, she said into her phone. Her room smells like old age, it just lingers. Old age, like I was spoiled milk, she laughed after she said it. That light, polished laugh she uses at networking events. I stood there still as stone. Then she added, once we fully take over the house, I'm gutting that entire wing. Fully take over, that part wasn't for her friend. That part was for herself, a belief she'd been nurturing quietly. I stepped back before she turned around. She never knew I heard it. Now here's something most women learn too late. When someone shows you how they see you, believe them. Don't argue, don't beg. Observe. That night at dinner, Daniel talked about market volatility and long-term positioning. Monica discussed a gala she was planning for a luxury skincare brand. I watched them. The confidence, the assumption. The way Daniel referred to the house as our equity. Our equity. I asked him casually, Daniel, do you know whose name is currently on the deed? He smiled like I'd asked something adorable. Mom, we'll sort all that out when the time comes. When the time comes? See, that's the thing about probate law. I've watched families wait for the time. I've seen children mentally spend inheritance before the funeral flowers dry. I've read petitions for conservatorship filed by sons who swore they were just protecting mom. I didn't say another word. Instead, the next morning I called Gerald Whitmore. Gerald has been our family attorney for over 25 years. He's in his early 70s now. Calm voice. No wasted sentences. If you ever want to know how serious something is, listen to how little Gerald talks. Alina, he said after I explained what I overheard. Are you reacting emotionally? No, I told him. I'm restructuring. Silence on the line, then good. We scheduled a meeting for Friday. That week, I started noticing things I had ignored before. Daniel had been receiving mail from a mortgage broker. Monica had been browsing luxury retirement communities online, except not for me, for them. coastal properties. Pre-construction investments, all dependent on liquidity events. Liquidity event? That's finance talk for cash out moment. I checked my bank statements. Quietly, no drama, just data. There were small transfers Daniel had labeled household expense adjustment. Amounts I hadn't explicitly approved. Not huge, just bold enough. That's when it clicked. This wasn't about a smell. It was about timeline. They were preparing for my exit. But here's what they didn't understand. I spent 30 years reviewing estate disputes. I know every trick in the book. And Thomas, he trained me well: layered ownership, revocable structures, contingency clauses most people don't even read. On Friday, I sat across from Gerald in his office. Dark wood shelves, leather-bound volumes. He reviewed the deed, the trust documents, the updated asset schedule. Legally, he said, adjusting his glasses, you have full authority to sell. And if I did, I asked, they would have 30 days at most to vacate depending on occupancy classification. I folded my hands in my lap. What about timing? He looked at me carefully. Are they planning something? Yes, I said, they just don't know I am too. Gerald didn't smile, he rarely does, but he nodded once. Then if you're going to move, Alina, move before they do. That night, Monica announced they'd be flying to Napa for a long weekend. Brand partnership, she said. Daniel added, good networking opportunity. I nodded. Enjoy yourselves? They left Friday morning, suitcases rolling across the marble floors Thomas installed. By Friday afternoon, Gerald had a real estate broker walking through the property. By Saturday, there was a private buyer. Cash offer, clean terms, quick close. The house market in our area was hot. Inventory low, my timing perfect. By Sunday evening, contracts were signed. Daniel texted me a picture of vineyard views and champagne glasses. Don't worry about anything at home, Mom, we've got it covered. I looked around the living room, the place Thomas and I built from blueprints. The staircase Daniel slid down as a kid, the kitchen where I hosted every Thanksgiving. And I whispered, no, Daniel, I do. Monday morning, the wire hit my account. Monday afternoon, the buyer's attorney scheduled possession. Daniel and Monica's return flight was Tuesday at 6:15 p.m. And at 6:30 p.m., when they pulled into the driveway expecting everything to look the same, it didn't. The locks had been legally changed. The driveway was empty. And inside the foyer, standing calmly with a leather folder in his hand, was Gerald Whitmore. But what he said when they walked in, that's what made them go silent. And that's where this really begins. Daniel tried his key 3 times. Monica stood behind him in heels that were not made for panic, whispering, why isn't it working? The porch light was on. The furniture inside was visible through the side window. Everything looked normal, except it wasn't theirs anymore. The door opened from the inside. Gerald Whitmore stepped forward, calm as a Sunday morning. Suit pressed. Leather folder tucked neatly under his arm. Good evening, he said evenly. As of 2:14 p.m. yesterday, this property has been legally transferred to its new owner. Silence. You could almost hear Daniel's heartbeat. Monica blinked twice like she didn't process English. Transferred, Daniel finally said. Transferred how? Gerald didn't raise his voice, he didn't need to. Sold. Monica laughed. It wasn't real laughter. It was the kind people use when they're trying to wake up from a bad dream. That's not funny, Gerald looked at Daniel. Your mother executed a full sale, clean contract, cash buyer, closing complete. Funds settled? Daniel's face drained of color. She wouldn't do that without telling us. That's when I stepped into view from the hallway, calm, steady, wearing the same navy cardigan I wore to court for 15 years. I didn't react, I said softly. I restructured. Monica's mouth opened slightly. Ellie, this is insane. Our things are in there. Gerald adjusted his glasses. Your belongings have been professionally packed and moved to a short-term storage unit. The address is in this envelope. He handed it to Daniel. Daniel didn't take it right away. He was still staring at me like he didn't recognize the woman who raised him. Mom, why? There it was, not anger first, confusion. Because entitlement rarely expects consequence. I stepped forward onto the porch. Because when someone starts planning for your exit while you're still breathing, you adjust the timeline. Monica folded her arms. We weren't planning anything. I held her gaze. Fully take over the house. Her eyes flickered. Daniel looked between us. What is she talking about? Monica hesitated half a second too long. That was enough. You were listening, she snapped. No, I said calmly. I was present. Gerald stepped slightly aside, allowing the reality to settle. You have 30 days to retrieve your property from storage before additional fees apply, he added. The buyer has granted limited access for removal of remaining personal items tomorrow between 9 and 11 a.m. After that, possession is exclusive. Daniel finally took the envelope. His hands were shaking. Where are you going to live? He asked. There it was again, not are you okay, not why didn't we see this coming, just logistics. I smiled gently. I already have. Monica's voice sharpened. You can't just sell the family home like that. I tilted my head slightly. It wasn't the family home, it was my home. That hit. Daniel ran his hand through his hair. Mom, we renovated that kitchen. We invested money. Gerald calmly opened his folder. All improvements were made voluntarily without a transfer of ownership or written equity agreement. There is no legal claim for reimbursement. Monica's lips tightened. So this is revenge? I shook my head. No, revenge is emotional. This was administrative. Daniel stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. You embarrassed us, Monica whispered. I didn't flinch. You were embarrassed by me long before this. The porch light hummed quietly above us. A car drove past. Life continued. Daniel looked at Gerald. We can challenge this. Gerald gave him a measured look. On what grounds? Your mother is legally competent. There is no coercion. The sale was valid. Funds are secured. Daniel's voice dropped lower. You're really doing this. I stepped closer so he could see my eyes clearly. I am done being positioned. Monica scoffed. This is unbelievable. No, I said evenly. What's unbelievable is thinking you can slowly replace someone in their own house and expect them to thank you for it. Daniel looked like he wanted to argue. Instead, he asked the question he'd been circling all along. What did you do with the money? There it was. Not are you safe, not do you need help. Money, always money. I gave him a small, knowing smile. That's structured. Gerald closed his folder. Mrs. Brooks has diversified the proceeds into protected allocations. Daniel swallowed. Protected from who? I held his gaze. From expectation? Monica stepped back, arms wrapped around herself now. Where are you staying? She asked, softer this time. Somewhere peaceful. I didn't elaborate, not yet. Daniel looked at the house one more time, the oak trees. The balcony, the front door he thought would always open for him. You didn't even give us a chance to talk about it. I paused. You had 3 years. Silence stretched long and heavy. Finally, Gerald spoke. If there are no further questions, I'll need to secure the property. Daniel looked at me like a little boy for a split second, then the wall came back up. Fine, he said quietly. Monica turned first, heels clicking sharply against the stone path. Daniel followed. They walked back to their car, not slowly, not quickly, just stunned. The engine started. Headlights flashed across the house one last time. Then they were gone. Gerald locked the door and handed me the final set of keys. Are you certain? He asked quietly. I nodded. They were preparing for my removal. He studied me for a moment. Most people your age avoid disruption. I gave a faint smile. Most people my age don't spend 30 years watching probate court destroy families. He nodded once. You moved before they could. Thomas taught me that, I said softly. Layered ownership. Quiet control, never transfer leverage before you're ready. Gerald left shortly after. I stood on the porch alone. The house didn't feel like loss. It felt like closure. But what Daniel and Monica didn't know, what they absolutely did not know, was this. Selling the house wasn't the real move. That had been in motion for months. And when Daniel opens that envelope completely, he's going to realize the house was the smallest piece of what just changed. Daniel didn't open the envelope that night. I know that because he called me at 11:42 p.m. His voice wasn't angry anymore. It was tight, controlled, the way people sound when they're trying to stay ahead of panic. Mom, he said, what exactly is in this envelope? I was sitting in my new living room when he called. Smaller space, cleaner energy, no marble floors, no performance, just quiet. You should read it carefully, I told him. I did, then read it again. Silence, papers shuffling on his end. Monica's voice faint in the background. It says temporary storage details and a notice of occupancy termination. He paused, and something about trust restructuring. What does that mean? There it was, the real fear, not the house, the structure. It means, I said evenly, that the estate plan has been updated. Monica's voice got louder in the background. Put her on speaker. I could almost see her pacing. Image cracked, control slipping. Daniel sighed and put me on speaker. Ellie, Monica said, her tone sharp but shaky. What did you change? I leaned back in my chair. I adjusted beneficiary allocations. Silence. Then Daniel spoke slowly. Adjusted how? Layered differently? That's when his financial brain kicked in. I could hear it. He understood leverage, he just never thought it would be used on him. You moved assets out of the revocable trust, he said carefully. Didn't you? I smiled faintly. Thomas and I built everything in layers. You assumed it was all sitting in one place. Monica cut in. You're punishing us? No, I said calmly. I'm protecting myself. Daniel's breathing changed. Mom, are you seriously telling me you cut us out? I'm telling you, I replied, that inheritance is not a retirement plan. That landed. Hard, he was quiet for several seconds. You always said everything would stay in the family. It is staying in the family, I said softly, just not an expectation. Let me explain something most women don't realize until it's too late. If someone is already spending your money in their head, they stop seeing you as a person. You become a timeline. So 6 months ago, long before the hallway comment, I met with Gerald Whitmore, not because I was angry. Because I was observant. Daniel had started using phrases like future liquidity and eventual transition. Monica had started asking questions about capital gains tax when the property shifts. They thought I didn't notice. I notice everything. Gerald and I reviewed every account, every property, every clause Thomas and I had set up decades ago. If you're restructuring, Gerald said back then, do it cleanly. So we did, the primary residence. Liquidated, the brokerage accounts, split into staggered trusts with performance triggers. The rental property Thomas bought in '92 transferred into a charitable remainder structure, and Daniel's automatic beneficiary designation converted to conditional distribution. He didn't know what that meant yet, but he would. Back on the phone, Daniel's voice dropped lower. What are the conditions? Stability, I said. Respect and time, Monica scoffed. You can't put emotional conditions on money. I didn't raise my voice. Watch me, Daniel exhaled slowly. Mom, this is extreme. No, I replied. Extreme is planning someone's removal while they're still living in the house. That shut Monica up. Daniel tried another angle. You're being influenced? I almost laughed. I spent 30 years in probate court, Daniel. I've seen sons file competency claims on their mothers because they wanted early control. I've seen daughters isolate fathers to shift signatures. I know the playbook. Silence again, heavy. Daniel finally asked the question he'd been avoiding. How much is left? There it was, always the bottom line. I let the silence stretch just a little. Enough, I said calmly. Enough for me to live comfortably, enough to support causes your father believed in, enough to ensure I am never positioned again. Monica's tone shifted. Softer now. Strategic. Ellie, we were just thinking long term. So was I replied. Daniel's voice cracked slightly. Do you not trust me? I paused, not for drama, for truth. Trust is built on how someone treats you when they think you need them. He didn't answer. I continued. When you thought I was aging out, you started calculating. You didn't check in. You didn't ask what I wanted. You started planning. Monica tried again. We were trying to secure the future. Whose future? I asked. No answer, and that's when Daniel realized something else. Wait, he said slowly. If you moved everything into layered trusts, that means even if something happens to you, he trailed off. He was doing the math now. The control wasn't automatic anymore, it was conditional, timed, structured. Yes, I said quietly, that means nothing transfers quickly. Monica whispered something I barely caught. She outplayed us. No, I didn't outplay them. I just stopped underestimating myself. Daniel's voice was smaller now. What do we have to do? That question told me everything. Not how do we fix this? Not how do we repair the relationship? Just compliance to unlock assets. I felt a strange, calm wash over me. You don't do anything for money, I said. You either rebuild the relationship because you value me or you don't. Monica snapped. This is emotional blackmail. I shook my head even though they couldn't see it. No, emotional blackmail is making someone feel like a burden so they give up control. Silence. Long silence. Finally, Daniel said quietly, "Where are you staying?" I looked around my new space. Warm light, clean air. No tension in the walls, somewhere peaceful. He swallowed. "Are we completely cut off?" "No," I said gently. "You're just no longer in control." The call ended without goodbye. And here's what Daniel didn't realize when he folded that envelope back up and placed it on the counter of a short-term rental that night. The trusts weren't the final layer. There was one more document Gerald prepared. One clause Thomas insisted on decades ago, a clause Daniel had never bothered to read. And when that clause activates, inheritance won't be the conversation anymore. Character will be. 3 days after the sale, Daniel showed up at my new place unannounced. No Napa glow, no tailored confidence, just stress in a pressed shirt. He stood in the lobby of my building looking slightly out of place, like a man who walked into a room expecting control and found none. I met him downstairs, calm, composed. "You could have called," I said. "You stopped answering," he replied. I didn't correct him. I had simply stopped responding immediately. There's a difference. We sat in the small courtyard outside, neutral ground. No marble floors, no performance lighting, just two adults facing reality. Daniel wasted no time. "I met with an attorney." "Of course he did. And?" I asked. "He said the restructuring is airtight." I nodded once. "Gerald Whitmore doesn't leave loose ends." Daniel leaned forward. "But he also said something else." I waited. "He said there's a dormant clause in Dad's original estate framework that could change everything depending on how it's triggered." There it was. He found it, or at least part of it. I didn't blink. "Thomas believed in behavioral clauses," I said quietly. Daniel frowned. "Behavioral clauses aren't common. They are when you've seen families implode over expectation." He studied my face carefully now. "Not as a son, as a financial consultant analyzing risk. It's tied to character evaluation, isn't it?" I smiled faintly. "You're catching up. Let me explain something important here because this is where most women underestimate their leverage. When Thomas and I built our estate plan, we didn't just distribute assets. We built conditions, not petty ones, not emotional traps, structural ones. If at any point a direct beneficiary attempted to establish financial control through coercion, undue influence, or premature asset positioning, distribution timelines would automatically extend. Significantly, Daniel's voice was tight. "The attorney said if there's evidence of manipulation, any inheritance can be delayed up to 10 years. I folded my hands. "Correct. 10 years, he looked stunned. "That's extreme. So is trying to quietly position your mother for removal." His jaw tightened. "We never filed anything. You discussed conservatorship in a parking lot." Silence. He looked away. That was confirmation enough. "There are cameras in that lot," I added calmly, "and witnesses." His head snapped back toward me. "You recorded us?" "No," I said evenly. "I don't need to record people who underestimate me." Daniel ran his hands through his hair. For the first time, he looked less like a consultant and more like a confused boy. "So what now?" That question again. "What now?" As if the answer would unlock money instead of maturity. "Now," I said slowly, "you decide who you want to be." He stared at me. "You're holding everything over our heads." "No," I replied. "I removed it from your hands." That's when Monica's car pulled into the lot. She stepped out wearing oversized sunglasses like she was walking into a tabloid photo. Image first, always image. She approached without greeting. "Daniel, we don't need to sit here begging." I didn't react, never react, restructure. "No one is begging," Daniel said quietly. Monica crossed her arms. "This whole thing is a power move." I tilted my head slightly. "Selling a property I legally own is a power move?" She didn't answer that. Instead, she shifted tactics. "You embarrassed us in front of our friends." There it was, reputation, that was the wound. "I didn't embarrass you," I said calmly. "You built a lifestyle assuming access to something that wasn't yours." Monica's lips pressed tight. Daniel spoke again, lower this time. "If we prove good faith, does the clause deactivate?" "Good faith, interesting wording. It's not a switch," I said. "It's a pattern." He looked exhausted. "Define the pattern." "Consistent respect. Financial independence, no premature positioning." Monica scoffed softly. "So we just wait?" I held her gaze. "You live." Daniel exhaled sharply. "Mom, be realistic, you're 78. "Yes," I said calmly. "And fully competent?" Monica's voice dropped, less sharp now. What if something happens? I didn't miss the layered meaning. If something happens, I said, the estate executes exactly as structured. Daniel's shoulders sank slightly. He understood what that meant. No rush, no quick payout, no emotional leverage. Dad really signed off on this? He asked quietly. I smiled gently. Your father believed money reveals character. That landed hard. Thomas had always been subtle but precise. He'd seen entitlement before, he prepared accordingly. Daniel looked at Monica. For once, she didn't have a polished response. Finally, Daniel said something that surprised me. I didn't think you'd ever use it. I studied him carefully. That's the problem. Silence hung between us. This wasn't about real estate anymore. It was about assumption, about the quiet belief that aging meant weakening. That mothers become softer, easier to move aside. Daniel finally stood. So we rebuild, he said slowly. Not a question, a realization. I nodded once. Monica didn't move. And if we don't? She asked. I met her eyes evenly. Then time will. They left without another word. But as Daniel walked to the car, he glanced back once. Not at the building, at me, not calculating, thinking, and here's what neither of them understands yet. The clause doesn't just delay inheritance, it evaluates conduct continuously, and one more misstep, one more attempt at leverage doesn't just extend timelines, it reallocates them. Permanently. 2 weeks passed, no dramatic calls, no legal threats, no emotional breakdowns, just silence. And silence tells you more than shouting ever will. Daniel didn't ask about money again, that was new. Monica didn't post anything online about fresh starts or unexpected blessings. Also new, instead Daniel called on a Tuesday afternoon. Calm voice, controlled. Mom, can I take you to lunch? Not we need to talk. Not we have questions. Just lunch, I agreed, public place, neutral ground. I don't meet people in rooms where they think they have leverage anymore. He chose a quiet restaurant near the water. No flash, no performance. When I arrived, he was already seated. No Monica, interesting. He stood when I approached. He hasn't done that since he was 25. You look well, he said. I am, I replied. We ordered, small talk at first, markets, weather, neutral territory, then he exhaled. I sold the second investment property. That caught my attention. The Scottsdale one? I asked. He nodded. It was over-leveraged. Translation, built on projected inheritance confidence. He continued. We downsized, cut expenses, no more short-term assumptions. There it was, assumptions. I didn't praise him, I didn't criticize him. I simply listened. Mom, he said carefully, I've been thinking about what you said about being positioned. I stayed quiet. Silence makes people finish their truth. I didn't see it that way, he admitted. But I can see how it looked. Looked still slightly defensive, but closer to awareness. Intent doesn't erase impact, I said calmly. He nodded, slow, processing. Then he asked something different, something I wasn't expecting. Were you planning this before the comment? Yes, but I let the answer unfold carefully. I started restructuring when I noticed language shifting, I said, when I heard timelines attached to my life. Daniel looked down at his hands. I thought I was being proactive. You were, I replied, for yourself. Silence again. Here's what most women don't understand. Growth isn't loud, it's awkward, it's uncomfortable. It sounds like long pauses at lunch tables. When the check came, Daniel paid without making a show of it. No, I've got you, Mom. No subtle dominance move, just normal. Before we stood, he said something else. I canceled the meeting. What meeting? I asked, though I already knew. The follow-up consult about guardianship strategy. There it was, the confirmation. I didn't react, never react. I'm glad, I said simply. He nodded once. It didn't feel right? That sentence mattered more than any financial decision. When we walked outside, he hesitated before getting into his car. Are we permanently damaged? He asked quietly. Now that was the right question. Damage happens when people refuse to see it, I said. Repair happens when they do. He didn't argue, he just nodded. But here's what Daniel didn't know. The clause isn't deactivated because he sold a property. It's not softened because he bought lunch. It watches patterns, behavior over time. And Monica, she wasn't quiet because she accepted it. She was quiet because she was calculating differently. 3 days later, Gerald Whitmore called me. Eleanor, he said in that steady voice of his, there's been an inquiry. I felt my spine straighten slightly. From a third-party financial advisory firm. I waited. They requested clarification on distribution triggers within your primary trust. Daniel wouldn't have done that alone. That had Monica written all over it. Did you respond? I asked. Of course, Gerald said calmly, with nothing. Good. Do you want to tighten access language? He asked. Yes, I said immediately. Because here's the thing, progress in one area doesn't erase caution in another. Thomas used to say, trust isn't rebuilt with hope. It's rebuilt with consistency. That night, I sat alone in my new living room and reviewed the amended documents Gerald emailed over. Stronger privacy barriers. Automatic trigger extension if external advisory manipulation is detected. Clean, precise, protective. The next morning, Monica finally called me directly. Her voice was soft, controlled. Ellie, she said, I think we got off on the wrong foot. I didn't correct her timeline. She continued, I'd like to invite you to dinner, just us. Just us, that was new. Why? I asked gently, a pause. Because I don't want this to be about money anymore. Interesting choice of words, not family, not healing, money. I'll think about it, I said calmly. After we hung up, I stared at the oak trees outside my window. You see, this is the part most people miss. The house sale wasn't the climax. The trust restructuring wasn't the real leverage. The real power shift happens when people realize you're no longer emotionally available for manipulation. But Monica doesn't know something yet. Gerald added a new micro-clause yesterday. One that activates if any beneficiary attempts to influence distribution through third-party advisory channels again. And if that clause activates, the allocation doesn't just delay, it redirects. Permanently. I accepted Monica's invitation, not because I trusted her, because I wanted to observe her. We met at a high-end restaurant downtown. Of course we did. Monica doesn't do emotional conversations without curated lighting and imported glassware. She stood when I arrived, air-kissed the air near my cheek, perfume expensive, smile polished. Ellie, you look wonderful, she said. I feel wonderful, I replied. That unsettled her slightly. I saw it. We ordered. She chose wine, I chose water. Clear head always wins. For the first 10 minutes, she spoke about neutral things, an event she was planning, a new client, a brand collaboration, all surface. Then she set her fork down carefully. I think we've misunderstood each other. Interesting. I understand you very clearly, I said calmly. Her smile tightened. I may have said things I didn't mean. You meant them, I replied gently. You just didn't expect me to hear them. Silence. She recovered quickly. Okay, fine, I said something insensitive, but selling the house, restructuring everything, that feels nuclear. Nuclear. People always call boundaries extreme when they benefit from your lack of them. I adjusted risk exposure, I said evenly. She leaned forward. You've created instability. I almost smiled. For who? She didn't answer that directly. Instead, she shifted. Daniel is under a lot of pressure. There it was, the pivot to sympathy leverage. Daniel is a grown man, I replied. She lowered her voice. He built projections around what he believed was stable. Assumptions aren't stability, I said. Her eyes hardened slightly. You've tied inheritance to behavior. Yes, that's manipulative. No, I said calmly. What's manipulative is positioning someone as mentally declining to gain control. Her jaw tightened. That one landed. I never filed anything, she said sharply. You explored it, I replied. She didn't deny it this time. Instead, she tried a different strategy. Softer, controlled vulnerability. I grew up watching my mother lose everything because she trusted the wrong people. I don't believe in leaving things to chance. That was the first real thing she'd said all night. I don't either, I replied. We held eye contact longer than before. Here's the truth most women ignore. Sometimes people aren't evil, they're scared, but fear doesn't excuse entitlement. Monica straightened. What would it take to reset this? Now we were finally at the real conversation. Reset? I asked calmly. Yes, for you to restore things the way they were. I leaned back. No, the word was simple, steady, her expression flickered. She hadn't expected a clean refusal. You're not open to reconciliation? I'm open to relationship, I said, not reversal. Silence. She studied me like she was looking for a crack in the structure. Then she said something that told me everything. If Daniel builds back independently, will the trust terms loosen? There it was again. Money first, always money first. The trust observes patterns, I said. And who defines the pattern? She pressed. I do. That answer made her sit back fully. For the first time, she understood something clearly. I was not bluffing. Dinner ended politely. No raised voices, no dramatic exit. But as we walked toward the valet, she said quietly, You've changed. I stopped. No, I said softly. I stopped. She frowned slightly. I stopped assuming love automatically meant protection. She didn't respond. When I got home, Gerald had left me a voicemail. Eleanor, you'll want to call me in the morning. There's been another inquiry. My pulse didn't spike, it steadied. I called him first thing the next day. A private equity group requested confirmation of your liquidity structure, he said calmly. I didn't need to guess. Monica's network. They're trying to evaluate exposure, Gerald continued. Exposure, that word again. Did they trigger anything? I asked. Yes, he said, my hands stilled on the table. The microclause activated. Silence filled my living room, and, I asked, Gerald's voice was steady. The allocation percentage just shifted. Shifted. Not delayed, shifted. Permanently? I asked quietly. Yes. I closed my eyes for a moment, not in regret, in recognition. Thomas always said the first move tests them. The second move reveals them. Monica thought she was being subtle. She wasn't. And now, because she couldn't leave it alone, a portion of what Daniel assumed would eventually be his won't be. At all. He doesn't know yet. She doesn't know yet, but when Gerald sends the updated summary next week, they're going to realize something. This was never about a house, it was about control. And control just changed hands for good. Gerald didn't rush things, he never does. A week after the second inquiry, the one Monica thought was discreet, he sent the formal amendment notice. Clean, legal, precise. Daniel received it at 9:12 am. He called me at 9:19. Mom, what does reallocated pursuant to conduct clause 4C mean? Straight to it. No small talk this time. It means, I said calmly, that a portion of your projected inheritance has been redirected. Silence. How much? There it was again, not why, not how do we fix this, just how much. 20%, I replied evenly. I could hear him sit down. Literally, the shift in breathing, the weight landing. Redirected where? He asked carefully. To the Brooks Educational Housing Initiative. He went quiet. That was Thomas's idea, years ago, a small foundation designed to help widowed homeowners avoid forced sales. We funded it quietly, modestly. Daniel never paid much attention to it, it didn't serve him. Mom, that's permanent? Yes. Because of the inquiry, yes. His voice sharpened slightly. I didn't authorize that. I know, I said calmly. But it came from someone in your immediate financial circle. He didn't defend her this time, he knew. Here's the part people don't understand about behavioral clauses, they don't punish, they adjust risk. And Monica just proved the risk was active. Can it be reversed? He asked. No, not harsh, not angry, just factual. On the other end, I heard a door close. Likely his office, privacy mode. She was trying to understand exposure, he said. Exposure to what? I asked gently. He didn't answer, because we both knew the truth. Exposure to losing early access. Exposure to uncertainty. Exposure to not being in control. I told her to drop it, he muttered. But she didn't, I replied. Another silence, longer this time. 20% is significant, he said quietly. Yes, I agreed. So is overstepping? There's something that happens when entitlement finally hits consequence. The air changes, the confidence thins, the tone shifts from strategy to reality. Daniel wasn't angry anymore, he was recalibrating. Mom, he said after a moment, I need to ask you something honestly. Go ahead. If we hadn't pushed, would everything have stayed the same? That question mattered. Yes, I said, no drama, just truth. If they had treated me like a person instead of a timeline, the structure would have remained generous. He exhaled slowly. So we did this to ourselves? Yes, there it was, accountability trying to form. Later that evening, Monica called. No polish this time, no curated tone. You moved 20%, she said, skipping hello. Yes, that's vindictive. No, I replied, it's corrective. She laughed once sharp, you're enjoying this. I paused, not for effect. For honesty, no, I said quietly. I'm relieved. Relieved that I no longer had to pretend not to see what was happening. She went silent for a moment, then she said something revealing. We were counting on that margin. There it was. Out loud, counting on my death, on timing, on access. I know, I said calmly. You've destabilized our projections. Good, I replied. That word hit harder than any argument could have. Because here's the lesson most women need to hear. If someone builds their future assuming your removal, destabilizing that assumption is not cruelty. It's clarity. You've changed, Monica said again. No, I answered softly. You just never expected boundaries. She didn't respond. The call ended without resolution, but the story didn't. 3 days later, Daniel requested another lunch. This time he looked different, less sharp, less certain. I reviewed the original estate file, he said quietly. And Dad wrote a note? I didn't react, I knew the note. Thomas insisted it be included in the sealed guidance letter attached to the trust. Most beneficiaries never read those attachments carefully. He wrote, "Wealth should reward character, not pressure." I smiled faintly. That sounds like him, I said. Daniel stared at the table. I don't like what this has revealed about me. That sentence was the first honest thing he'd said in months. Growth doesn't start with apology, it starts with discomfort. I don't want money that comes with surveillance, he added. It's not surveillance, I replied. It's accountability, he nodded slowly. For the first time, he didn't ask about percentages. He asked, how do I rebuild trust? Now we were finally talking about the right thing. But here's what neither Daniel nor Monica understands yet. The 20% was only the visible shift. There's another clause, one that activates not from financial pressure but from demonstrated integrity over time. And if Daniel continues changing, genuinely, consistently, something unexpected could happen. Because the structure doesn't only penalize, it can also reward. 6 months passed, no more surprise inquiries, no more quiet financial fishing, no more subtle positioning, just time, and time reveals more than pressure ever does. Daniel stopped asking about percentages. He stopped referring to eventual transition. He stopped building projections that included me as an exit strategy. Instead, he started calling just to check in, not to discuss structure. Not to test tone, just to talk. The first time he came over without an agenda, he brought coffee. Not a document, not a question, coffee. We sat at my small kitchen table. No marble, no staging, just quiet morning light. Mom, he said carefully, I moved our accounts. Where? I asked. Out of the advisory circle Monica was using, I'm rebuilding from actual cash flow, no forward assumptions. That mattered, because independence isn't about ego. It's about removing invisible strings. Monica didn't come around at first. Her pride ran deeper. But over time, something shifted there too. She sent a handwritten note one afternoon, not an email, not a text. Paper, it said. I confused security with control. I see that now. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't poetic, but it was real, and real is rare. 3 months later, Daniel asked to meet with Gerald Whitmore, not to challenge the trust. To understand it, that's when I knew something had actually changed. Gerald called me after the meeting. He didn't ask how to access it, he said. He asked how to protect it. Now that was new. You see, there's something I never told Daniel directly. Thomas built one final provision into our estate. If a beneficiary demonstrates consistent financial independence, respect for boundaries, and 0 attempts at premature leverage for a continuous 12-month period, a discretionary restoration clause becomes available. Not automatic, available. It doesn't just return what was reallocated, it expands trust authority gradually. Because Thomas believed in something most people don't, consequences should teach, not just punish. At the 9-month mark, Daniel hadn't slipped once. No probing, no pressure, no future language. He even corrected Monica once during dinner when she joked about when everything settles. He said calmly, "We don't build our life around someone else's timeline." I didn't react. But I noticed, never react, restructure. At 11 months, Monica did something unexpected. She hosted a charity event, but not for branding, not for optics, for the Brooks Educational Housing Initiative. The same foundation that absorbed the 20%. She didn't ask me first. She didn't frame it as damage control. She simply did it. And that's when I scheduled the meeting. 1 year to the day after the house sale, Daniel and Monica sat across from Gerald and me in his office. Same dark wood shelves, same quiet room. Daniel looked steady. Monica looked composed but not curated. Gerald opened the file. Under discretionary clause 7F, he said evenly, Mrs. Brooks has the authority to restore adjusted allocations based on observed conduct. Daniel didn't move, he didn't lean forward. He didn't smile, he just listened. I spoke calmly. Money reveals character, I said, but it can also shape it. Silence. For 12 months, I continued, you built your life without leaning on mine. Daniel swallowed. Monica stayed still. I'm restoring 10%, I said, not 20, 10, because restoration should reflect growth, not erase consequence. Daniel blinked. Mom, you don't have to. I know, I replied. That's the difference now. He wasn't asking for it. Monica spoke softly. Thank you, not for the money, for the trust. The meeting ended without celebration. No champagne, no dramatic reconciliation, just clarity. That night I sat alone in my living room. Smaller home, quieter life, stronger boundaries. Thomas used to say, the real asset isn't property, it's discernment. He was right. Selling the house wasn't revenge. Restructuring the trust wasn't punishment, it was alignment. Here's what I learned, and what I want every woman listening to understand. When people start calculating your worth before you're gone, you don't argue, you don't beg, you don't shrink, you restructure. And sometimes, just sometimes, when boundaries are clear and consequences are real, people rise to meet them. Daniel still doesn't know this part. The remaining 10% can be restored too, but only if the pattern holds. And this time, I'm not watching for control, I'm watching for character.